He pointed a gun at my daughter over a parking decal. She pointed a badge back that made him wet himself. And she wasn't even supposed to break cover. Has anyone ever used authority to threaten your family over HOA nonsense? Ever seen? Someone take it too far? Tell me your story below, especially where you're watching from. I read every one. And if you love quiet revenge stories like this, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-world takedowns. My name is Daniel Hayworth. I'm 56, retired, mostly invisible in my own neighborhood and just fine with that. But last July, someone in our HOA tried to make me feel small, only they didn't go after me. They went after my daughter. And they didn't know she was under deep federal cover for Homeland Security 6 months into an active operation. Her name's Erin. She's 32. Quiet. Focused. Lived with me for a while during a gap between assignments. I told the HOA she was visiting. They didn't ask further questions. They should have. Because on a humid Thursday morning, a man named Rick Arliss, a self-appointed HOA enforcer with a badge he printed at Staples, decided Erin's car didn't belong in our cul-de-sac. It started with a note. Unregistered vehicle, remove or be towed, HOA zone. He slapped it on her windshield with masking tape and a smug smile. I saw him do it from the upstairs window. Erin didn't say anything. She just peeled it off, folded it, and placed it in the glove compartment. No reaction, no concern. Later that day, I asked her, "You good?" She said, "He's lucky I'm off duty." That should have been my first warning. Rick wasn't a real cop. He was the kind of man who buys surplus uniforms online and patrols neighborhoods like he's on an episode of Cops. Middle-aged, former mall security, now HOA security liaison. No real authority. Just a clipboard, a vest, and a radio that only connects to himself. But in his mind, he was Judge Dredd with a landscaping budget. 2 days later, it escalated. Rick approached Erin's car, again. Only this time, she was in it. She'd just gotten back from the gym, still wearing sunglasses. Music on, windows down. Rick marched up, demanded she exit the vehicle, and accused her of loitering with intent. Loitering. In front of our own house. She ignored him. He reached for the door handle. And that's when she stepped out, slow and smooth, and said 5 words I'll never forget. "You're about to regret that." Rick pulled a handgun from under his vest. Not a taser. Not pepper spray. A full weapon. Loaded. Unsafe, and shaking in his damn hand. He pointed it directly at her chest. "You don't belong here," he said, eyes wide. That's when Erin reached back into the car and came out holding a black leather wallet. Flipped it open. Inside? Her federal credentials. Homeland Security Operations Division. Rick blinked. The gun dropped half an inch. She said one. Sentence. "You just committed 6 felonies in under 10 seconds. I suggest you sit on the curb before backup arrives." And he did. Sat like a kid in detention, arms shaking, as 2 real officers pulled up within minutes. Apparently, Erin had hit her emergency comm. They took Rick away in cuffs. He kept screaming about HOA authority and sovereign citizen rights. Didn't matter. Erin gave her full statement on record, then reminded the officers she wasn't supposed to reveal herself unless national security was at stake. They nodded. Pointing a weapon at a federal agent counts. That night, Erin and I sat on the porch. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. "They're going to sweep it," she said. "Rick, the HOA, he's their puppet. But the board knew. I've seen the chatter on his neighborhood radio net. They encouraged it." I stared into the dark. "Then what do we do?" She sipped her tea. "You?" "Nothing." "Me?" "I'll make sure they forget what power feels like." The HOA tried to claim Rick acted alone. They posted a community update calling it a misunderstanding, but Erin already had screenshots, messages, emails, even an HOA Slack channel where board members joked about scaring off the strange girl with the out-of-state plates. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was targeted harassment, fueled by power, driven by fear. But they picked the wrong target because Erin wasn't scared of war. She just preferred it quiet. She moved back out the next week for optics, she said. Didn't want them to know where she was planning to strike from. But before she left, she handed me a file folder. It was thick, organized. "Don't open it," she said. "Not unless they try something else. Just know. I've been listening for a while." Then she got in her car and drove off like nothing had ever happened. The HOA stayed silent. Rick made bail but lost his gun, his radio, and every inch of imaginary power he ever pretended to have. But the board, they didn't apologize. They didn't even acknowledge what happened. That's when I opened the folder, and that's when I knew. Erin wasn't just playing defense, she had a plan. The folder was labeled in Erin's tight, all-capital handwriting, Crescent Fall File, Active Monitoring. Inside were photographs, emails, phone logs, a black USB drive taped to the back cover. At first glance, it looked like an overkill dossier, until I realized every line had one thing in common: names from the HOA board, and not just Darren, the president. All of them. The first document was a printed Slack conversation between HOA officers. Darren, the girl in 184B is parked again. Same car. No decal. Rick, do your thing. Rick, on it. I'll scare her off by tomorrow. Linda, treasurer. Make sure she doesn't call the cops. HOA can't take another complaint. There were 9 separate threads like that. All of them read like a bad high school clique with walkie-talkies and small-town power. But what made my spine stiffen wasn't the threats. It was the pattern. Erin had connected every incident in the last 2 years where someone mysteriously moved out after minor HOA disputes. She had cross-referenced them with HOA meeting minutes, security notices, and somehow even deleted HOA chat logs. She wasn't guessing. She was building a case. I didn't hear from her for 9 days. Then I got a call from an unlisted number. She didn't say hello. She just said, "They were never going to stop with me. They've been purging people for months. Why? Money, power, and something worse. I'm going to take them apart piece by piece." Then she hung up. The next morning, Sarah Delaney knocked on my door. Sarah lived across the street. Kindergarten teacher, sweet, quiet, careful. She looked shaken. "Got a letter," she said. She handed it to me. It read, "Your property has been flagged for unauthorized play equipment. Failure to remove it within 48 hours will result in a fine and citation." Sarah's son had a swing in their front yard. Same style as ours, but here's the catch. She had a permit. The HOA just didn't care. I asked her if she'd had issues before. She hesitated. "They made me remove my dad's flagpole last year. Said it was unapproved structure height. I asked to see the rule. They sent a picture of a flagpole crossed out." She looked down. "I didn't even want to fight. I just took it down." That's when I knew. They didn't just make Rick their enforcer. They made the neighborhood afraid to question them. That night, Erin sent another package. No return address. Just a flash drive and a note. If they're bold enough to point guns, they're bold enough to forge documents. Plug this into a laptop offline only. You'll understand. I did. And what I found wasn't just HOA tyranny, it was fraud. The flash drive contained PDFs of official HOA documents, budgets, fines, citations, but when opened in a reader that showed editing layers, you could see they'd been altered, dates changed, names swapped. Fine amounts increased after resident submission. There was even a quiet blacklist spreadsheet labeled Non-Compliant Owners, Watch List. Sarah's name was on it, so was Erin's license plate, and terrifyingly mine too. I called Mark. Sullivan next. Mark had lived 2 blocks over since 2004. Former city clerk. Knew more about zoning law than Google. We hadn't spoken in months, but when I showed him the documents, he didn't flinch. I always knew something smelled, he said. You think this is enough to trigger a recall? Enough? I asked. This is enough to bury them. We formed a quiet team. Me, Sarah, Mark, and remotely Aaron, who I now knew was feeding us intel while still undercover in a separate assignment. She'd rerouted HOA server traffic through a ghost IP, every Slack message, every fine, every unofficial conversation, all duplicated, all timed, all sorted. It was a kill folder waiting to drop. The turning point came when we found the real financials. Hidden deep in the audit log were scanned invoices for security, improvements, and committee expenses, tens of thousands of dollars. But guess what? No actual work was ever done. Mark checked the permits. Pete, the same contractor they claimed to hire, had never filed any jobs. Fake vendors, Mark said. They created dummy companies to invoice themselves and drain the budget. He whistled low. And the HOA president is the one signing it all. Aaron confirmed it through one line of chat from Darren's private Slack. Move $4,200 to landscaping this month. Rick needs a new uniform. Make it clean. We were staring at embezzlement, intimidation, forgery, abuse of power, but we didn't go public. Not yet. We printed it. We laminated it. We notarized it. We created the binder. And then we started calling residents, one by one. Mark hosted quiet. Backyard conversations. Sarah invited neighbors over for cookies and coffee. Each time, we slid the binder across the table like a weapon. Every time someone saw it, they signed the petition. After 12 days, we had enough to force an emergency recall vote under Clause 8.7 of the HOA Charter. Something Darren never expected anyone would find, let alone use. We delivered the motion by certified mail to each board member. No warning. No conversation. Just the law. Weaponized by the people they underestimated. Sarah rang my doorbell that evening. Her son stood beside her holding a handmade sign. No more bullies. We stood on the porch, watched cars slow as the word spread. Watched people nod, whisper, smile, and still, Erin hadn't shown her face. Didn't need to. She was the ghost in the machine. The storm behind the silence, and she was just getting started. 2 days after the petition was filed, Erin called me again. This time it was brief. Operation Pinecrest is green. Tell Mark to watch the 6 p.m. slot on Channel 9. Then she hung up. No explanation. No details. But the tone in her voice wasn't just calm. It was surgical. That evening, I sat in my living room with Sarah and Pete. Mark dialed in on speaker. We had mugs of coffee in our hands, papers spread across the coffee table, the infamous binder front and center. At 6 sharp, the local station faded in. The screen cut to Lindsay Maris, an investigative journalist known for her no-nonsense takedowns of small-town corruption. She stood outside our clubhouse. What happens when a homeowners association forgets who it works for? Tonight, Andy. Exclusive look into Crescent Falls HOA, accused of financial misconduct, intimidation, and impersonation of law enforcement. We go inside a story where one quiet resident turned the tables and exposed the entire board. Cut to clips of Rick being hauled away in cuffs, the decoy security badges, the falsified fines, Aaron's uncovered Slack screenshots, and then, blurred but unmistakable, Darren's voice from a recording. Just say the girl was threatening. Homeland can't prove anything without tape. Then the overlay came up. Federal investigation pending. Pete nearly dropped his cup. Mark laughed. A long, exhausted laugh. Sarah clapped once and whispered. She did it. No speeches. No statements. Just a journalist with a camera and a hardline truth. It aired for 9 minutes and 17 seconds. And in that time, the HOA crumbled. By 6:45 p.m., the Crescent Falls Facebook group was on fire. Did anyone else see the news? Darren lied to us. I got a fake fine last year. Can I sue? Who is that girl with the badge? And then came the comments under the HOA's last official post. A photo of Rick at the garden. Club ribbon cutting. Nice to see a criminal with scissors. Which vendor paid for those flowers? Oh, wait. None of them exist. I'm out. I want a refund. Aaron texted me at 7:03. Phase 2 complete. Let the silence work. That night, I stood outside by the porch light. Watching. People walked past, nodded at me. Some looked embarrassed, some looked relieved, but no one looked afraid anymore. The next morning, a box arrived at the HOA office. Sarah was already there. She saw the whole thing. No label, no sender, just a plain cardboard box with one thing written on top. Accountability. Inside, printed copies of the fake fines, audio transcripts, vendor records with red ink that said fraud, and a single USB stick labeled "Play me during the recall meeting." The emergency meeting happened on Saturday. 128 residents showed up. The usual chairs weren't enough. People stood against walls, in doorways, some even brought lawn chairs. Mark opened the floor. He said nothing about Aaron. He just hit play. The room fell into stunned silence as Darren's voice played through. The speakers. We make up a little fear. It keeps the sheep from wandering. Rick's a tool, but he gets results. Gasps. Then Rick's voice from a Slack audio log. Pointing a gun wasn't the problem. The problem was she had a damn badge. And then, finally, Aaron's voice. Calm, clipped, controlled. You used intimidation to control a neighborhood. You stole money under fake vendors. You endangered federal operations. You made my father a target. And you made a mistake thinking I was just a guest. The audio ended. So did Darren's career. Within 10 minutes, he was gone. No speech, no defense. Just stood up, grabbed his binder, and walked out the back door into the parking lot, never looking up. Rick's membership was revoked the same day. Linda, the treasurer, stepped down before the vote even started. That left a hollow board and a room full of stunned residents. Mark stepped up. We're not here to tear it all down, he said. We're here to build something fair. And with that, the new leadership was voted in. No shouting, no slogans, just signatures and quiet resolve. The following week, residents received hand-delivered letters, typed, signed, and sealed by the new board. We acknowledge the past misconduct of Crescent Falls HOA leadership. A full financial audit has been launched. All fines issued from January 2022 to August 2023 are under review and temporarily suspended. Residents are encouraged to come forward with documentation. Together, we will rebuild with trust. Some people cried, reading it. Some just folded it quietly and nodded. I received a separate envelope, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Aaron, sitting on a bench near a marina, sunglasses on, holding a coffee, smiling. On the back, written in black ink, "Mission complete." Sarah planted a garden bed that spring, filled with lavender and rosemary. Mark put up a community board near the clubhouse. Pete hand-painted a wooden sign that read, "This neighborhood runs on truth." And me? I finally put up the swing my daughter bought me last year, the one she never got to enjoy while staying here. It sits under the oak tree now, clean, silent, and safe. 3 months later, we held a block gathering. No speeches, no HOA patrols, no clipboard inspections, just music, food, laughter, and in the center of it all, the residents Aaron protected, the ones who never even knew how close they came to living under permanent control. But she did. And she stopped it. Not with rage, not with noise, but with silence that moved like lightning under the surface. Fall arrived in Crescent Falls like a quiet apology. No more notes taped to cars, no more patrols, no more Rick. The neighborhood felt slower, lighter, real. You could hear wind through the trees again, the kind of silence that used to be filled with fear, now just sounded like peace. The swing under my oak tree creaked softly in the breeze. The one Aaron bought before everything happened. It sat unused for months, until now. Now kids stopped by to sit on it. One little girl called it the spy swing, and I didn't correct her. I just smiled and said, "She's not a spy, just someone who knows how to listen." The HOA was no longer what it used to be. Mark, now board president, led monthly meetings with folding chairs and fresh lemonade. No fancy charts. Just facts, updates, and room for questions. Pete helped redraft the bylaws, stripping out every line that once allowed unchecked power. Sarah started a resident rights subcommittee. She called it the Watchers, but not in a creepy way. More. Like guardians, neighbors, finally watching out for each other instead of watching each other. And the binder? That infamous black binder filled with Aaron's evidence? It now sat in a locked glass case inside the clubhouse, labeled simply, "This Changed Everything, August 2023. Residents called it the neighborhood's constitution. One morning, I got a letter in the mail, no return address. No name, just a card with 2 words handwritten inside, "Still watching." There was a small Homeland Security pin taped to the bottom corner. I laughed. Then I framed it. The financial audit revealed everything Aaron had predicted and more. Fake. Vendor accounts. Redirection of community fees. Even a slush fund labeled emergency hospitality that turned out to be Darren's travel expenses. When confronted, his lawyer offered a settlement before the case could reach court. The board rejected it. They wanted truth, not silence. Eventually, Darren paid back every stolen dollar plus fines. Rick pled guilty to impersonating an officer, unlawful firearm, discharge, and harassment. He got probation and community service, cleaning public parks in a neon vest. The irony didn't go unnoticed. One resident even snapped a photo of him picking up trash near the clubhouse. She sent it to the group chat, with the caption, "Look who's finally doing something useful." For the first time in years, Crescent Falls felt like home again. No fear of stepping outside, no one measuring grass height with rulers, no whispered threats in boardrooms. Instead, people borrowed sugar again, helped fix fences, laughed in driveways after sunset. It was everything a neighborhood should be, and it took a quiet war to win it back. Erin never returned, at least not in person, but her name lived in every new resident guidebook. Every welcome packet included a short page titled, "Know Your Rights, Know Your Power." Written anonymously, but we all knew. Mark even started a podcast, called it Behind the Gate. His first episode told the story of the false fines, the binder, the recall. Episode 2 was called The Girl with the Badge. He changed names, but he didn't change the impact. I listened to every episode, not because I needed the reminder, but because I wanted the world to remember what silence can build when it's used with precision. In early November, I received one more package, plain cardboard, black wax seal. Inside, a small wooden plaque with the words, "Justice is quiet until it isn't." And beneath that, in small engraved letters, Crescent Falls, restored 2023. Sarah hung it on the clubhouse wall that weekend. At the next board meeting, a new resident pointed to it and asked, "Who wrote that?" Mark smiled. No one you'd expect, but someone you're safer because of. That winter, we held the first neighborhood holiday gathering in 5 years. No one required permission slips. No one issued warnings about noise. Instead, there was music. Cookies, carolers. Someone even dressed as Santa and handed out fake parking tickets with candy canes attached. One read, "Cited for excessive holiday spirit." We laughed until we cried. The biggest change came not in policy, but in posture. People walked taller, looked each other in the eye, asked questions without fear. The culture had shifted, not just in words, but in tone. And that was Erin's greatest gift. She didn't just expose corruption, She planted something stronger in its place. Pete built a small community board near the entrance to the subdivision. Residents pinned everything from garage sales to lost cat flyers. And every week, someone anonymously tacked up a small sticky note, different colors, different handwriting, but always the same 3 words. She fixed it. One day I sat on the swing, sun setting low, watching 2 kids race their bikes up and down the sidewalk. The girl stopped, pointed to the oak tree, and asked, "Is this her tree?" I nodded. Kind of. She made it safe again. "Where is she now?" I smiled. "Everywhere you feel free. Because justice doesn't always kick in doors. Sometimes it walks quietly through them and leaves the door open for everyone else. And sometimes, when someone points a gun thinking they're in control, they end up staring down the barrel of the law, held steady by the daughter they underestimated. She didn't need backup. She was the plan, and she left no room for fear to grow back.